On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the importance of this film? I heard a 12. I heard a 12. Okay. I commend everybody for their rapt attention. This is serious material. Like I said earlier on, though, when we leave here today, we're going to leave here in a positive forward motion. We have some very concrete and responsible actions that we can do that you'll see can have a great effect between now and the next 2 months. So with that, there won't be an intermission. We're just going to be moving the tables for the panel out in front of the screen. Just bear with us a little bit. In the meantime, I would like to say a few things. Let's see. We'll have the speakers start to come up, and as soon as the tables are arranged, let's see, I want to give a couple of acknowledgments too. Part of what we are seeking to do is transform politics, correct? Correct. Well, we have a gentleman here who's running for Congress in Carolyn Maloney's district. She hasn't been challenged quite a while. Want to just give a quick shout out to Sander Hicks. Sander, look out for him. He's going to be running. Yeah. Also, is Julia Willebrand in the house? Okay. Julia is an official in the Green Party, and there are a lot of alternatives that we can be working towards. And that's all good. And nevertheless, whoever the legislators are in your district, we can be forming little task groups from with organizations that you belong to, or just individuals, community groups, to be doing a basic action request. Matter of fact, we can designate this next week as a call-in week to urge our legislators to close what's called the 702, Section 702 loophole in the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. That's the loophole, basically, that allows a perpetuation of the NSA's ability to spy on all Americans randomly and indiscriminately. Section 702. How does that sound? See, very doable. I said earlier, it doesn't have to be heavy lifting here. Activism can be just basic civics 101, but when you have the power of numbers, then that's called clout. We can have clout. And it's interesting to, in my observations, and you see if you agree with me or not, but there has been an awful lot of phenomenal research done over the last several decades, having to do with all kinds of various political scandals, political crimes of the highest order. Incredible research, could fill libraries full. And there are many of us in this room, I know this, have spent years and years and hours studying, reading books, watching documentaries. And yet, what's it going to take, though, to actually have all our knowledge and all this incredible research translate into justice, into political progress, into creating a responsible government that acts in the interest of the American public, not the corporations like SAIC. Okay? So, yeah. See, the researchers have done their work. Filmmakers like Oliver Stone and Friedrich Moser have done their work. And the people in this film, my gosh, have they ever done their work? I think they should go down through in the Guinness Book of Records as among the top in the profiles of courage, that's for sure. Okay. Yes. With that, how are we doing? Here they come. Great. Oh, just one other quick announcement. There's a table in the back. You can sign a petition for a new congressional investigation of the events of 9/11. Would that seem like a very pertinent thing to do? Great. Don't forget. Okay. Come on through. Here, okay. Come on, Sean Stone.
Okay, thank you, Les. So let's get Bill and Diane and Ray up here so we can start this conversation, because there's a lot to talk about, and I don't want to hold you guys up any longer. Mr. William Binney at the end is a 30-year veteran of the National Security Agency, as you hopefully know by now, having watched the film. Top mathematician, cryptologist, and the creator of the program Thin Thread. And Mr. Ray McGovern, you've maybe caught on RT and other Democracy Now! And all these other important channels. The mainstream media doesn't like the fact a long-time CIA level officer who became he was in charge of preparing daily security briefings for the presidents, vice presidents, all the way from Reagan through George H.W. Bush. And Mrs. Diane Roark, Republican staffer on the House Intelligence Committee from 1985 to 2002. And obviously you saw her as well in the documentary. Really, her story is not fully known. I think there's a lot more to get into. I guess I have to start with Mr. Binney over here, because we have to know what is going on down at CIA headquarters as far as what you can divulge to us of how this conversation went with Mr. Pompeo, and basically what, just give us a little bit of a sense of the briefing that you were able to give.
Well, first of all, I was kind of surprised to get a call from him to go in to see him. He invited me in to see him, and I of all people, I've been calling them all criminals for years, so why would they invite me in to talk? Well, it turns out that as I got in there, the first thing that Director Pompeo said to me, he said, the president said that if I wanted to learn some facts about Russiagate, that he should talk to me. And so I got called in. So I went in there, and he said, well, what do you know? And I said, well, from the BIPS group, we had about 6 of us together were doing that. And it wasn't just me, it was Ray was involved, and Kirk Wiebe, and Skip Holden, and several others. And some network experts, they would understand the network, how it works and everything. So we were basically technical people. We were looking at all the data that Guccifer 2 put out there on the web. We're looking at timestamps of the data and everything, so we could look at how it was tapped off on the 5th of July of 2016. And we said, well, gee, they're taking down 16 gigabits of data. This is what I was telling Director Pompeo. They're taking down 16 gigabits of data in 87 seconds. That can't be handled by the web. That can't be transferred to Europe across the network by the web. It had to be a local download. It was really pretty simple. And people said, no, you can get that rate, across the Atlantic. You say, okay, let's try it. So we tried it. I had some senior hackers in Europe that I knew, and I said, you want to help us do this? And we had some help here in the U.S. Like one of our guys put a gigabit of data out there and said, here, you go pull it. So we pulled it from Amsterdam and even in the UK, and the best we got was 12 megabytes, that's bytes, not bits, per second, which is roughly 1/4 the capacity necessary to transfer the data in that time frame. And we couldn't get it any faster. And we tried it in various other places. We even went to Belgrade and Albania, and gave up because the network was so slow. It was slower the further east you went.
So getting into Russia was just been impossible. But at any rate, we couldn't even, from a data center to a data center in the UK, we couldn't get that data across the net that fast. So we knew that proved it was a local download. But it happened to be exactly at the right speed for a thumb drive download. So that kind of said to us, well, it's local. I mean, where it went after the local download, we don't know. But we do know that the download was local. Guccifer 2 was saying it was a hack from, across the Atlantic. That's not possible. So that questions, who is Guccifer 2?
And so at the end of your summation or your briefing, what was their response like?
He asked me to talk to the FBI and NSA and see if I could find out if they could tell. First of all, he told them right up front that the NSA and the FBI, they're all lying to you. I mean, because when they come out and said, it was FBI, CIA, and NSA who said in their report that we have high confidence. Well, to me, that immediately meant they're lying. I mean, they have nothing. And the reason I know this is because of all the taps that NSA has on the fibers, and they have embedded into them traceroute programs. Well, traceroute allows you to follow the path of packets wherever they go. And they've got hundreds of these in the US and around the world. So, if any packet in the US goes anywhere, they know where it goes. So that also told me it didn't go across the net. That was the first thing back in August of 2016 that I said they were lying, And in fact, they are. When you read the FBI report about the hack, there isn't any evidence there. And if you look at their 14-page paper, on the 13th page, it says, you shouldn't interpret our inferences as having any basis of fact to say this is certainly what happened, And they're basically saying right up front, we don't have any evidence. Well, that's why they've never told you they've had any evidence, because they don't. It's all a fabrication.
I think their main evidence was the Russia Today, the news channel RT, the fact that we were not pro-Hillary. I think that was the most certain evidence they had that we must be influencing the election.
And now they have to register as a foreign agent, right?
Yes. Well,
and isn't that nice for the First Amendment? We can't stand the First Amendment. I mean, we have to censor people.
It's okay. I can't wait till the other networks have to register as foreign agents too, because we know that they get their money from other countries like Saudi Arabia and other places. So here we go.
What about the BBC? Huh?
Exactly, the BBC, our imperial counterparts. I want to go to Ray now to talk for a second. What's interesting is because you were focusing on analyzing the Soviet policy towards Vietnam, I got into it with Jim Carrey on Twitter yesterday because he was saying, in '68, the Soviets or the Russians were backing our enemy in '68, and now they're putting their puppet into power in 2016. And I said, man, how ignorant is that statement? Jim Carrey, I love you, but really, Vietnam was not our enemy. We have to wake up. Come on, are we really still talking about Vietnam as an enemy of the American people? Like, this is 50 years. This is like retrograde thinking, isn't it? So the idea, though, that he represents, in a sense, this consensus perception, which is that there is a Russian phobia that continues. There is this Russian bear that continues since the Cold War, and during the Cold War, they were fighting us on every front, and here they are again working against us. Is this really a deep state propaganda that we're looking at, and basically a war that's perpetuated by the deep state against Trump?
Well, thanks, Sean. Some of you may have noticed I'm having a little trouble here. Maybe it's because I'm a New Yorker, and it's also because I invited some 9/11 widows to be here, and I don't see them anymore. And so I want to apologize to all of you New Yorkers who were personally touched by what happened and by the malfeasance, not misfeasance, of the people we used to work with. And suffice it to say right now, I'll recover in a while. But I think we're talking about good Americans, plural, here. And I just feel very honored to be with Diane as well as with Bill.
So you don't want to...
Can I turn it over to Diane right now and come back to me?
Come back to that issue? Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of 9/11, I mean, we have to address this. Certainly, the documentary explores the issue of what Thin Thread was capable of assessing in terms of what is known. But there's many unknowns, and we found out recently with 28 pages that FBI had an informant in San Diego that essentially, there were ties to Saudi intelligence that are becoming more and more clear. We have, obviously the FBI memos from Rowley and others who were basically trying to inform people of, operations. We have plenty of literature that existed of the hypothesis of, terror operating in the U.S., flying planes into buildings in other countries with Bojinka. But you could even take Tom Clancy's book, Executive Orders, from '96, where he hypothesized. And Clancy is known for relationships with the intelligence agencies, hypothesizing an attack on the Capitol in his book. And Jack Ryan became president, and then Iran launched Ebola right after the attack, just like the anthrax that happened right after our 9/11. So I think that there are many issues about 9/11 that people are not satisfied with the investigation, the 9/11 Commission report. What can you say as far as your assessment of what is being withheld continuously from the U.S., not only involving Saudi, but even domestic agencies actively preventing the discovery of the terrorist plot?
Well, I believe it's disgusting. I believe Congress has abandoned its duty to oversee the agencies and to make sure they conform to the law. In fact, the intelligence committees have become the worst purveyors of the scare theories, and we want more. We want more domestic surveillance. We want more of everything. And the leadership then channels all of the legislation, the proposed legislation, through the intelligence committees, where they basically put the kibosh on anything that is very much of a real change. And they also pretty much, it seems, take the administration proposals and just put them through. And I believe I was the first. I retired in April of 2002, but I did do the markup for the intelligence authorization bill that year. And I put in some of the language that NSA was at fault for the attack. And it really bothered me later. Well, it turns out I was surprised that my committee let that go through. But then later, the staff director went up to NSA and made a speech and retracted it. But I was most disgusted with the 9/11 Commission report and all the others that, NSA didn't take any hits at all. There was almost nothing said about NSA. And it was CIA and the FBI that took the greatest criticism. But I think what happened was they pulled classification on them again, just like they did on the members. They said, we'll brief you into this thing, but you can't ever say one word about it before they've ever been briefed. They agree to these terms, and then then the commission is told that they can't publish anything about domestic surveillance. So what good is a commission, really, when it comes down to it?
And Diane, we can, to continue with you, it's interesting to me when it comes to the nature of cyber war, because that's the new phase we're in. Today, shadow brokers. Is that it? Shadow brokers. This new news item hit that shadow brokers is like a new anonymous type of group that's divulging basically details about NSA agents and operations and all kinds of analysis. And of course, it says, well, it's probably a Russian group, or an inside job, or some combination of the two. That's literally the analysis that's given to you in the mainstream media by the intelligence community. But we're in this place where we don't know. As citizens, we are completely blind to understanding what cyber war is. I mean, it's difficult enough to analyze a real attack, a physical attack, and people are becoming more and more savvy to false flags, to understanding the nature of operations. They don't just believe just because the FBI says the lone nut did it, I'm going to believe that story. But when it comes to cyber, it's as though we really have this sort of the wool pulled over our eyes, and we say, well, how can I analyze that? How can I know if it's Russia, China, North Korea, an inside job, our own agencies, some private corporation? I mean, we're basically in this void of understanding it. And I think, with your experience with the intelligence community and the committees, how can we analyze the nature of cyber war from an intelligence perspective? I want Diane can give it, and then Bill too.
I think the first thing you have to understand is that we were at the forefront of cyber war, and we went on the offense. And there's a little problem with that. And the problem is that we rely on computers more than anybody else in the world almost. I mean, we were right up there at the very top, especially at that time we were. So it's like people throwing stones when they live in glass houses. It's exactly what it's like. And the second thing I want to say is that in the cyber warfare area, the US government has always favored offense much more than defense. And that means when they are implanting in encryption schemes, for instance, so-called backdoors, so that they can, US systems are used all over the world, not just in the US, and so they can go and exploit it for intelligence, for information. So it's an offensive use of it. But what happens is when they do that, the defense is burdened. Basically, we're leaving US citizens and corporations open to attack so that they can collect information on other people. And I think it's a big conflict of interest. NSA traditionally has had both an offensive and defensive role. In fact, they were supposed to be securing US government systems, especially for the Defense Department. And I can speak to this personally because I'll tell you how much US systems have been protected. You may remember that the Office of Personnel Management was hacked grievously, and half of all intelligence persons, all cleared persons, including at very high clearance levels, had their security applications stolen. And so not only is this an issue of identity theft, but they think they were stolen by the Chinese. Well, if the Office of Personnel Management isn't even encrypting their databases with this kind of information, and the intelligence community isn't insisting that it be encrypted, what is their right to tell US businesses what they should and shouldn't be doing? And they had been trying to take over the cyber defense. And the emperor has no clothes, basically. And my own information was stolen twice. And this is everything about you. It's your social security numbers, your date of birth, your whole educational history, your whole work history, your whole family. I mean, it's perfect for assuming another identity. So now we have a massive CI problem because half of all intelligence employees going back for years and years had their stuff stolen. But anyway, the bottom line is, I think we have to get real encryption as a first step. And we can't have the government be objecting to that. And there's been a big fight with a lot of the IT firms about this, because they've been wanting them to build a backdoor into their stuff and letting them in. And you can't build a backdoor that only the US government can get into, or that only Google or somebody can get into. It's impossible. Somebody else can find it. So, this whole effort by the FBI and the Department of Justice in particular to put the kibosh on really effective encryption has to be confronted. And the other thing is, the second thing is that we need the IT community to focus in particular on really usable safeguards for the ordinary person who does not know a whole lot about IT, but also for businesses, because they've been taken to the cleaners so many times.
Bill, you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I was going to comment on the the whole business of the attack part of this, which is cyber attack. That NSA has been working on it for a little over 30 years. Okay, and so all the stuff that CIA has, we help them out. Here's all these attacks we already know about and have been capitalizing on, but haven't been giving anybody protection. So we left everybody in the world vulnerable. And instead of fixing them, we let them be so we could look in and see what everybody's doing. Well, it gets to the relationship between the two parts of NSA. One is the attack side, which is where I came from. The other was the defensive side, the Information Assurance Directorate. And, one time I solved a little system that was kind of, they also did something similar for our people. So I went over there and explained how I solved the thing that the other guys are doing. And I said, no, is this something similar to you do? And they said, we can't tell you. And I'm in the same agency, okay? And I just told them how our side worked, or their side, the bad guy's side. And they're doing the same kind of design, and they wouldn't even tell me even the design was the same. So they wouldn't even talk to me. So I said, okay, I went away. And that's what happens. The people in the attack side, in the computer exploitation area, didn't talk to them. So if they tell them what the weaknesses are, these people might fix them. And if they fix them, the window will close for the attack side. And so they left everybody vulnerable. And that's why everybody's getting attacked, because the weaknesses are still there, and people eventually find them. I mean, this is not rocket science. They have no monopoly on the smart people in the world. I mean, there's lots of smart people out there. So they're going to find these weaknesses too. It's only a matter of time. And now with the exposure of Vault 7 out of CIA, which is a copy of the material from NSA that was leaked by, I think Martin was the guy that they arrested anyway. That's thousands and thousands. The WannaCry attack was one of them. And it shut down things in a certain area, shut down a number of hospitals in the UK and all, Well, get ready for a really rough ride. Unless they fix these problems, you've got thousands of other attacks that people have available in the network, and anybody can use them just because they were invented in NSA and passed the CIA. Does that mean either one of them did it? No. That means you have to, every time there's an attack, you have to trace the packets as to where they eventually went, because everybody's got access to these things now. So this was all a responsibility of the attack side, not talking to the defense side inside NSA, and also not telling the companies that build these products, you have a problem, and they don't share that. So everybody's left vulnerable. And when in fact they should have, and every time, by the way, this is I call the second swindle. The first swindle of all of us was based on you have to give up privacy for security. That was a lie from the beginning. And they knew that because Thin Thread showed that and demonstrated that. But they refused to do that because it didn't produce enough money for them. The second swindle was the cybersecurity. Every time there's an attack that they knew about, by the way, and didn't fix, every time they did that, they'd come up and say, we need more money for cybersecurity. Well, why don't you fix the things you know that are wrong, and then maybe we'll have some cybersecurity. Well, the third one now is with this Russiagate. They're trying to create a Cold War again, which is going to cost us all about $2 trillion, And that's what they're after. They're after this money. So, this is all a circular thing about this military-industrial intelligence complex wanting to feed on everybody and put everybody in debt. We're at $20 trillion now in debt. So, get ready for a continuing ride of and people swindling you.
Absolutely. And so to elaborate on the Russiagate, I mean, yeah, Ray, as far as who are we looking at? What's your analysis of the deep state? Because it's pretty clear. I think anyone who reads the newspaper can pretty quickly get a sense that, all right, Trump is Trump is with the Russians, and so everyone has to attack basically, Russia, Trump, anything to do with his policy, his politics. And you have to wonder, okay, if the media represents that component of deep state thinking, then what is it really about? Is it purely money, or is there an ideology, or is there something else at work?
Oh, I am a little weary because I stayed up much of the night writing a piece for Consortium News, which is on the web now, which is titled "Trump Confronts Deep State Full Bore." He did that in Vietnam. He named names of the previous intelligence directors. And I talk a good bit about that in that article. I want to pick up on just one thing about the Chinese hack. Amazing, okay? Amazing. And I think it's pretty confirmed that we do know the Chinese did it. As a matter of fact, we know the building in Beijing from which they did it, right, Bill? Did you tell me that?
Shanghai.
In where? It's not Beijing. That's the only city I know in China. Where was it? Shenyang?
Yeah, Shanghai.
Okay,
Shanghai.
Shanghai. All right. So, why do I mention that? Well, how about the Russian hack? Oh, do we know the building? Do we know the building? No, we don't know the building. Do we know anything?
don't know anything.
In the Bronx, we would say we don't know diddly about the Russian hack, right? Because you think maybe there wasn't one, right? Okay. Now I want to say
I can't find it.
a couple things about the incredible luck that I've had. In my career, I had a lot of good jobs, briefing presidents, but one that was really good because I had a community role. I was a deputy national intelligence officer for Western Europe in the 70s when all hell broke loose in Western Europe. Now, I mention that because there were times, this was a community role, okay? That meant that I worked for the director under his hat as head of the whole intelligence community. So I knew the folks in NSA. I didn't know many people in Congress, but I could call on real experts to give me straight answers, okay? The best experts around, like Bill, okay? And here I find myself with veteran intelligence professionals for sanity, with about 30 of the realist experts in the world on various endeavors, okay? Now, when the hacking came up, I mean, that was Bill. I mean, how do you get any better than Bill or Kirk, Or Ed Loomis you saw there. He and Bill were both technical directors of various parts of NSA. So what I'm saying is that we have a little cottage industry intelligence community here in veteran intelligence professionals for sanity. We're not very popular with people like General Hayden, but I'll just give you a little, we used to say in the Bronx, I'll give you a for instance, okay? Here's a for instance, okay? Now, I go on RT whenever they ask me. I'm proud that I go on RT. Why? Because unlike all the other people that ask me interviews, and they're decreasing in numbers, RT never asks me for a pre-interview interview. Okay? BBC, Al Jazeera, CNN, they all want to know what you're going to say. And sometimes the BBC said, well, thank you very much, Mr. McGovern, we don't have time for that. Okay? So, what happened here was on the 31st of March, I get a call from RT at 7 o'clock in the morning. Now, I know that they're not open till about 10 o'clock, So I said, what's going on? Oh, we got a really interesting thing here. We've got a Vault 7 release, and I said, what is it? And they sent me the link. I said, oh my God, it's okay. Can you come in? I said, sure. Can you be here by 9? Now, rush hour traffic in Washington? I said, well, I could drive down the carpool lane, So, for the country, you make sacrifices, right? So there I am driving down the carpool lane. I had read the article very briefly, but I said, now, okay, Ray, what are you going to say about this? Hey, Bill, are you up yet? Okay, there's this Vault 7 tool called Marble, and it allows the CIA, which has a great big cyber offensive unit now, mostly peopled by NSA NICs, okay? It allows them to hack into a computer system and obfuscate. That's a pricey word we use in the CIA. Obfuscate who hacked in and leave little traces like, they worked in 5 languages: Chinese, Korean, Persian, Arabic, and Cyrillic. My friends say Russian. Yeah, Russian. So you can hack in, disguise who hacked in, and leave a little thing. I said, wow, Bill, this sounds like it might be relevant. We all source analysts like to connect dots, and hacking in and leaving whoa, I said, can you tell me about it? He says, yeah, Ray, it's real. He says, you tell him that I know. I was there when they started it, about 15, even more years, and it was NSA, CIA, working this thing out together. And I said, well, what else can I say? He says, well, tell him that it has 700 million lines of code, Ray. So I say, oh, is that a lot, Bill? He said, yeah, Ray, look, Ray, one line of code costs $25. Can you do multiplication? Yeah, I can do both. Wow. So there I go to RT. I'm all prepared, and I tell him, like I'm an expert on this thing, exactly what this is all about. Now, Vault 7 was advertised by Julian Assange on the 7th of March this year as having more data in it, more revelations than all the stuff that Edward Snowden brought out into Hong Kong. That's a lot of stuff, folks, okay? They can take control of your car, make it go 100 miles an hour. They can monitor what you say in your bedroom through use of a Sanyo TV, and now they can hack in and leave telltale signs, okay? So what I'm saying here is that veteran intelligence professionals for sanity is really blessed by the expertise we have in things like NSA and military matters and diplomatic matters and all kinds of other all-source analysts. And right now, we are fighting a very unpopular battle because nobody, and I mean, well, maybe, nobody I know wants to be seen as somebody who says something good about Trump, okay? Who wants to look like they're defending that clown in the White House? Well, this doesn't matter. You know, somebody asked Bill the other day who he voted for. Completely inappropriate question for an intelligence professional. People don't understand. That is completely irrelevant. We follow the information where it is. We tell it like it is. And we may be the only shop left, the only skunk works, if that's what that does that, and is blessed by the kind of expertise that kind of comes to us when people get so ticked off that they retire or they just want to tell the truth. So look at what we do. It's on consortiumnews.com. There's a special tab up there that says VIPS memos. And we just did our 50th, and that was the one that hit pay dirt, because never in my life did I expect that the President of the United States would call the head of the CIA and say, hey, I got this memo from Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, and I want you to go talk to the guy who wrote it, Bill Binney. So, you know, it's...
Ray is not taking... Ray herds us like cattle, you know. He keeps us in line. Hey?
Well, I try to. It's not easy.
Well, Consortium News is a wonderful newspaper, and Robert Perry runs it, great journalist. Couple more questions, then we'll open up to audience. Bill, just to get back to this issue, because beyond the cyber war issue, there's this cyber surveillance. And when you left NSA, you said NSA was becoming the new Stasi organization or agency. There's a confusion I think people have, and really it's amazing to me that even with Snowden's revelations, the film Snowden came out, it wasn't really necessarily watched by mainstream people. There's a lack of awareness and understanding of what NSA actually is able to surveil. They have terms like metadata and things like this that get thrown around and obscures the conversation. So what is it that NSA can actually access and do with our information as US citizens?
Well, they can do things like use it against the Tea Party or the Occupy group or Elliot Spitzer to get rid of him because he's going after the bankers for defrauding people. They could do that. They can use it against anybody they want to, anybody who opposes the position of the government.
You mean as far as accessing actual phone conversations, actual texts,
Conversations,
actual email information?
emails, everything. It's all being stored. I mean, they had the Utah facility, a 1 million square foot facility that they're storing. My estimate was about 5 zettabytes of data. That was based on the Cisco company's estimate of. See, they sold them the routers to route data into that center, and they were estimating that by 2015 they would be getting 966 exabytes a year into that center. That's it's about a zettabyte.
It's a lot of bytes.
It's a lot of bytes, yeah. And they were thinking about yottabytes, and then when they come with quantum computing, maybe you have to go beyond that. I said, well, okay, the next one should be a bunch of bytes or a lot of bytes or something like that. Something humorous, But no, they're capturing everything. I mean, that's why Tim Clementi, the former FBI agent, after the bombing in Boston, came on CNN And he said, you know, we're asking the wife of one of the Tsarnaev brothers what they discussed in their phone call before the bombing, and if she didn't tell them, they had ways of getting back at it. Well, the ways they have getting back at it is it's digitized, it's stored. Not just in Utah. There's another 600,000 foot facility in San Antonio, and there's other places like Denver and Fort Meade. They've got computer buildings and supercomputers and all that stuff there. But one of the things I wanted to point out about this hacking that has been missed here by the lamestream media, because they're not thinking, it's just regurgitating a line. The president basically came out and said he believes Putin. Now you have to think about that for a minute. If he believes Putin, what has his intelligence agencies told him? They haven't told him anything convincing. That means they have no facts. So here they're expecting him to believe something when in fact it's not true. And in fact, we had evidence to the contrary. That's why the president sent Director Pompeo to talk to me. Well, I mean, that tells you right away that the intelligence community is lying to the president. Now, this is very dangerous. This is the kind of situation you get with a slam dunk with weapons of mass destruction, and you go kill a couple 100,000 people.
You didn't tell Pompeo that, did you?
Yes, I did. And he said, and
I told you, plain spoken.
I didn't, I also told him, he said, well, this data is classified, you can't do that. I said, wait a minute. John F. Kennedy, President Kennedy, released the classified photographs of the missiles in Cuba back when the Cuban Missile Crisis was going on. That was to say, here's the evidence, it's clear they've got the missiles there, And then President Reagan, when the Russians shot down the Korean airline, he said, and he released the Japanese recordings of the air-to-ground traffic control, the Russian fighters, when they ordered them to shoot down the plane. And he released that in the UN. That's classified too. So I said, there's no excuse for this. If they're going to call this an act of war, release the evidence. Classification is not relevant here.
Yeah, add something to it.
Okay. I wanted to address the issue of what kind of data they are collecting. And it is far, far more, far broader than anybody realizes. It's not just classified data, which they classify because they've collected it by secretive means. And as Bill said, that's everything. That's, everything you do on your computer, your cell phone, your geopositioning, a whole bunch of things like that. Your telephones and your landlines, everything. But it goes well beyond that. And I found out before I left, well, actually after I left in July of 2002, that they were actually collecting commercial databases at that time with very private data about US citizens. And their collection program has just kept increasing. I was shocked when I saw Snowden's data. It was so bad before, and it had exponentially increased. And it's not just US citizens that are at risk. We are most at risk because the government that is collecting this, as well as the UK, has so much power over us. We have this big Leviathan state, and you depend on them. You depend on it for Medicare, Medicaid, whatever. For everything. Every single citizen has multiple points of pressure. But beyond these private databases, and some of them appear to be collected by NSA when they go over the wires, but the fiber optic lines, but some of them are collected and can be collected at any time through the business records provision. The business records provision, everybody thinks was kind of limited to like AT&T and the IT companies and the telcos. Well, that's not true. They can go to any business and demand that they turn over their records. Or they can collect them as they're going on over the wires. And as I said, some of this is very, very sensitive information. Like, if they can collect, earlier it was mentioned credit cards. Every time you use a credit card, where you use it, when you used it, that kind of thing. Your financial stuff, your credit rating, it's limitless. It's absolutely limitless. And then in December of 2012, it was revealed by Julia Angwin on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and nobody paid any attention to it. But it was revealed that all the federal government databases on its citizens are also being collected and put together with all this classified information. So every time you deal with a government agency, you have to realize that that very well might be collected, and it is all centralized at the Counterterrorism Center at the CIA. And this is another thing. People say, well, is NSA protecting us? NSA is now just a small part of the problem because they give whole databases to FBI, as Bill indicated before, and everything goes to our foreign intelligence agency. This domestic data is all going to CIA, where this Counterterrorism Center is located. But it is anything that the CTC asks for the Counterterrorism Center, that agency has to provide it. And it was considered a major change in the government's relationship with its citizens. So now they have dossiers on everybody that reveals across the board everything about you. I don't know if the IRS documents are there, but anything they want, they can get. Medical information, whatever.
It's fascinating. I mean, we'll continue the conversation with the audience, but I just want to end with this remark, basically, before we go to the audience, which is, in 2001, there was a conversation going on about privacy, if you recall. It was because Echelon was being discussed, which was basically the first blanket vacuum that was, used by the Five Eyes, the Australia, New Zealand, US, UK, Canada service, basically of this information empire, sharing of information. And because people were aware Echelon was absorbing all these phone calls and emails and other records, there was a conversation of, well, what are they vacuuming into Echelon? And obviously the government denied it officially at the time, but it was being discussed at that point. And what's interesting, obviously, with the Snowden revelation is how much GCHQ pops up, which is the British intelligence apparatus, is actually the home of a lot of the programs that we use. But the point is that it's an outsourcing combination of basically international imperialism and intelligence gathering. And obviously it's grown since then. But it's as though because of 9/11 and what occurred, that has basically, if I'm correct, put the nail on the conversation about privacy and about the idea that this is actually invasive. Because really, based on this idea that the war on terror is permanent and justified, we have no more basis of our legal rights as citizens.
Yeah, but I would also add that, and one of the important things is that NSA, with their budget, is never audited by the U.S. government, by law. Same is true with CIA. They aren't audited, and they should be.
No, wait a minute. Congress did, in the Intelligence Authorization Bill at one point, actually several years in a row, requested a DOD audit of NSA, and the DOD came back and said their books were not auditable.
Yeah, that's right. They did do that.
And it
yeah.
remained that way for years.
And they're still not audited.
My
That's the
books.
point. Yeah.
Sounds like my books.
Hey, can I just say a quick thing here? Just to give you an idea from a civilian's point of view, after Ed Snowden released all that information, and people like Bill confirmed that, yes, it is everything, well, it's not like the East German Stasi. And some of you remember that wonderful film, Das Leben der Anderen, the lives of others, okay? It gives you an idea what the Stasi was like. Well, we contacted at that point Wolfgang Schmidt, who was a colonel in the Stasi, and we said, Wolfgang, what do you say to the people in the United States that say, we don't have anything to hide, we're okay, we're fine? And Wolfgang said, this is incredibly naive. The reason they collect this stuff is to use it against you. The only way you can prevent it from being used against you is to prevent it from being collected in the first place. And that's it, right? And, I see enough people out there with this color hair. All I want to say is, if you want to put your body into it, as some of the rest of us have, you will find out that they may beat you up just a little. They're not going to kill you. But Americans relate to old people getting beat up, all right? Mm-hmm. Now, what I'm saying here is that when I got beat up a couple of times, Hillary Clinton's office, Petraeus' office, they all got flooded with emails and phone calls because Americans don't like old people get beat up. So why do I mention that? Okay, young people, they have it coming to them. Young people need to watch old people who feel strongly enough to do as I've done. I have to go up to Syracuse on trial at the end of the month for closing down Hancock drone base. But you know, young people need to know that we feel strongly enough to do that if we're inclined. There is something we can do besides being aware. We need to take some action and put our bodies into it, in my view.
All right, we got a huge queue, so let's go ahead with the first question.
Hi, this is on. It reminded me of when Scott Ritter, they said he had child porn on his computer. Do you remember that, when that happened? Scott Ritter, the weapons inspector.
The UN weapons inspector, he was very much opposed to the Iraq War and the build-up to 2003. I remember him going to universities and lecturing, actually, and trying to raise
He was on Amy
the
Goodman, all the
awareness.
shows, and then all of a sudden they said, oh, he had child porn on his computers, how they neutralize people. I've lost about 100 friends in the last year. Do you have any advice on being, my friends think, they either don't know you or they think you work for, I say, Bill Binney and Ray McGovern, they say, Julian Assange, Ed Snowden, they work for Russia. You can't get anybody now. Like, I'm such an outsider in my group, and you either eliminate these people in your life who just keep calling you a conspiracy theorist, or, it's all comic book. Where do you get all these ideas? When I bring all this information to people, I'm just wondering, how do we bridge that thing where people have this line like this, and all their peer groups in their circle keep them intact in this ideology of that we're all crazy. And how do you do that without eliminating every single friend we have to get this information out? I mean, I asked 50 friends to come today, and luckily I have about 10, but I mean,
basically, the question being, how do you basically break through?
There.
How do you break through consensus thinking, basically groupthink? And you're the CIA guy. You should tell us. What's the strategy? How do we counter propaganda?
But I mean, as the VIPs, we put out the data we had. We
Nobody
just put it in the. Yeah, well, every time somebody says something different to us, we say, well, "Where's your facts? Here are ours. They're published." Let's have some facts, please, not your opinion. Thank you very much for your opinion. It's like body parts that other people, everybody has.
There's a Binney axiom about opinions. I think it'll be okay to say this in this setting, yeah?
My axiom.
Yeah, your axiom. Yeah. Opinions are like assholes. Everyone's got one. Sorry about it.
That's a quote from Platoon.
Just one more.
Could
just
I
one
add
more thing.
something?
Can I just say one more thing? And is it possible on 9/11 that there were multiple operations like JFK? So if that was going on, and also the nanothermite and everything with the controlled demolition that Richard Gage and all those guys, so that there were multiple operations that were going on that day. The people that knew not to fly, they were informed not to fly on 9/11. The planes going up to Alaska and Canada, the war games that were going on, there were multiple operations that were going on, aside from the information the intelligence agencies.
We'll let Diane talk about what she wants. We're not here to analyze 9/11 because they do, their expertise is not to analyze the assessment of the building and obviously the larger scope of it. But if Diane wants to comment on, the 9/11 Commission and her experience and whatnot.
I would suggest that the way to be most effective is to focus on what everybody can agree about. Not on wars, not on, that's very divisive. But in answer to your original point that you're losing friends, what we have to do is get the right and the left together on this. It's the center that is supporting the current policies. And it is the Tea Party conservatives and the progressive left that is opposing them. And we need to cooperate. We need to cooperate. I mean, everybody criticizes the Congress because they can't cooperate is partly because the country is split right down the middle. But if we could get these two groups together and we could be really much more powerful.
Next question.
Elliot Greenspan with EIR. I think I can pose an approach towards such cooperation. What I want to ask about is cui bono. Who benefits from this fraudulent narrative which the VIPs have documented? Go back to Iraq. The VIPs were formed in 2003 at the point that Bush, Cheney, Blair launched a war based on lies or failed intelligence. They said Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction. Mueller was running FBI for 12 years, from 2001 through 2013, and Mueller was blocking an investigation by the Joint Congressional Investigative Committee on 9/11. Did Mueller allow a serious investigation of the Saudi role behind 9/11? What happened? Patriot Act, regime change wars, they continue. Now the VIPs put out this memo in the summer, and you guys are to be congratulated by every American patriot for that. Because what you identify is that we have a fraud that's been perpetrated for a year and longer by the Obama intelligence community and sustained by the New York Times, et cetera, which fraud claims that the Russians meddled in this election. And what's the proof? The so-called hack, and then Christopher Steele's dossier, the sex dossier, and things like that. I would suggest that the entity that meddled was not Russia, as Putin continues to say, and Trump believes him. I would suggest we're talking about the British, GCHQ, Steele, British intelligence, the list goes on and on. We have documented, EIR, people in the audience have the opportunity to pick this up, it's in the back. Robert Mueller is an amoral legal assassin. He will do his job if you let him. And this documents 3 crimes of Mueller. In the 80s, the frame-up of Lyndon LaRouche. I was in front of a Mueller grand jury 15 times back then. LaRouche went to jail as an innocent man for 5 years on a 15-year sentence. My brother-in-law, 10 years on a 77-year sentence. That's Mueller, to prevent LaRouche's SDI and related ideas. I'll finish in a second.
Yeah, what's the question, though?
Secondly, the cover-up of 9/11. And thirdly, the setup of President Trump. Trump effectively sent Binney to see Pompeo, as we've seen, and you had that discussion. What is your sense of the cui bono? Who's benefiting from a huge fraud which the mainstream media and so on continues to perpetrate, which would lead to a situation in which U.S. is at conflict, if not war, with Russia, in which Trump's ability to work with Russia and China on the new Silk Road, global economic progress is the basis to peace, his ability to do that would be knocked out by this McCarthyite witch hunt. I'm afraid too many of the New York Times readers here may believe that stuff. Who benefits from this one?
There's a whole series of people, mainly a lot of companies, contractors, right up front, and then a lot of senior people in these agencies that are getting contracts and getting, as a fallout from the money of all these attacks and like cyber attacks and terrorist attacks, and they keep using that to generate fear in the public and saying we have to do these things until you get more money. The first thing the French did after the first Paris attack was to say we need another billion euros, another 1,000 analysts, and more data. Well, that just keeps that cycle going, and those are the people who are making it. And when the people in the government agencies retire, they go into these corporations to come back, as we said in the film, to solicit contracts from their home agencies, or the agencies they used to be in, because they have all the contacts, and they do that. And so they are part of the benefits. So, and Congress benefits because in their constituent areas, they get all this contract money coming in. And every time the contractors go to them and say, we need more money to do stuff, they're benefiting in the sense of getting reelected and also having their constituents happy. So it's government, it's all of it. Government contractors, and the government agencies, there are seniors, and everybody's feeding off all of us.
With what you have exposed about the Russia hack story, it seems that it is unavoidable that what is currently happening is that there's an attempt to undermine or even perhaps bring down a lawfully elected president of the United States by a corrupt grouping within our government. Given this seeming inevitable conclusion, it seems that people should realize that whether you like Trump or whether you hate Trump, if you believe in democracy and the rule of law in the United States, then you should stand up and defend Trump from these attacks, which are based on complete lies.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, even though Obama got elected, I didn't particularly care for his policies or anything, but I didn't try to subvert him, because if he's failed, our whole country fails. That's the point. Trump is our president. If he can't succeed, then our country doesn't succeed. So we're really hurting ourselves by doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just have to say that if there aren't enough reasons already quite apparent to get rid of Trump, I have 9 grandchildren. They're not going to have clean air to breathe. They're not going to have clean water to drink. I mean, there are any number of things to be used for the flexible clause in our Constitution, high crimes and misdemeanors, to get rid of Trump in an orderly way, as our founders foresaw when a person acts this way. What I object to is using a lie, that is the cooperation with the Russians or meddling or other like kind of stuff, because that's, that sets a really bad precedent, because you shouldn't get rid of a president on a lie.
But Ray, it's just like thin thread. The way you want to do it doesn't generate money.
I lost my husband on September 11th, and I was one of the widows that fought for the 9/11 Commission. The first time we really heard about the NSA was the 2 leaks that came out. Tomorrow is 0 hour, and the match begins tomorrow. And those came out via Senator Shelby, from the best of my recollection, and then Cheney went ballistic that those things got released to the public and that everybody heard those leaks. Who actually said that? In other words, who said those words? The match begins tomorrow, and tomorrow is 0 hour.
I think those were emails back and forth between the members of the terrorist groups that were involved. I mean, I think probably the Yemen facility was the relay point.
And why did Cheney go ballistic on Shelby?
If you do something like that, you expose your failings to the public. If you attack somebody for exposing something like that, you make yourself even look worse. Why didn't you know? If you knew, why didn't you say something? If you didn't, why didn't you stop this? All that data was in the NSA databases. They didn't even know they had it.
It didn't feel like that to us. I'm just going to say.
I was really,
I think
being a part of that agency, though, it makes you angry at people who are in charge of there because of what they did. If this program we had would have picked that up as it happened, and would alert everybody simultaneously. There were that was another problem. It didn't allow people to control knowledge and information, because the program automatically distributed it, within seconds of it hitting the database. It wasn't a question of having someone being able to stop anything, because they couldn't. That's why they didn't adopt that program.
The United States, then you should stand up and defend Trump from these attacks, which are based on complete lies.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, even though Obama got elected, I didn't particularly care for his policies or anything, but I didn't try to subvert him, because if he's failed, our whole country fails. That's the point. Trump is our president. If he can't succeed, then our country doesn't succeed. So we're really hurting ourselves by doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just have to say that if there aren't enough reasons already quite apparent to get rid of Trump, I have 9 grandchildren. They're not going to have clean air to breathe. They're not going to have clean water to drink. I mean, there are any number of things to be used for the flexible clause in our Constitution, high crimes and misdemeanors, to get rid of Trump in an orderly way, as our founders foresaw when a person acts this way. What I object to is using a lie, that is the cooperation with the Russians or meddling or other like kind of stuff, because that's, that sets a really bad precedent, because you shouldn't get rid of a president on a lie.
But Ray, it's just like thin thread. The way you want to do it doesn't generate money.
Doesn't make money.
I lost my husband on September 11th. I don't know how to do this.
Yeah, pull the mic, pull the mic.
I lost my husband on September 11th. And I was one of the widows that fought for the 9/11 Commission. And the first time we really heard about the NSA was the two leaks that came out. Tomorrow is 0 hour, and The Match Begins Tomorrow. And those came out via Senator Shelby, from the best of my recollection, and then Cheney went ballistic that those things got released to the public and that everybody heard those leaks. Do you know who actually said that? Who was that intercepted? You know, who? I know the NSA intercepted it, but who was it who released those words? And can you tell us more about that? In other words, who said those words? The match begins tomorrow, and tomorrow is 0 hour.
I think those were emails back and forth between the members of the terrorist groups that were involved. I mean, yeah. I think probably the Yemen facility was the relay point.
And why did Cheney go ballistic?
Why did what?
Why did Dick Cheney, the vice president at the time, why did he go ballistic on Shelby?
Because if you do something like that, you expose your failings to the public. You know, if you attack somebody for exposing something like that, you make yourself even look worse. Why didn't you know? If you knew, why didn't you say something? If you didn't, why didn't you stop this? You know, all that data was in the NSA databases. They didn't even know they had it.
It didn't feel like that to us.
I'm
just going to say.
I was really,
I think
being a part of that agency, though, it makes you angry at people who are in charge of there because of what they did. This program we had would have picked that out as it happened, and would alert everybody simultaneously. There were that was another problem. It didn't allow people to control knowledge and information because the program automatically distributed it, within seconds of it hitting the database. It wasn't a question of having someone being able to stop anything, because they couldn't. That's why they didn't adopt that program.
Did you want to say something?
Yes. My feeling, and this is just speculation on my part, my feeling is that Cheney was angry because he was the one that had promoted the domestic surveillance program and had probably the White House had protected NSA in these reports, and so there was no criticism of them afterwards. And I think he didn't want any discussion of SIGINT at all. He wanted no SIGINT leaks. He didn't want any precedent for that because all this other stuff might come out too.
Well, and just one more question. We also know that Midhar had planned the Cole bombing. He was one of the planners of the Cole bombing, which came in October 2000, and then almost. So 11 months later, we had 9/11, and Midhar was involved there too, and we know that they were following him, that the CIA was following Midhar in San Diego. What was he doing in the country? How come they didn't stop him?
I think this is a bigger...
Let me ask, I need to tell you something about this. Since we knew Osama bin Laden's Inmarsat phone number, we had the entire worldwide al-Qaeda network laid out. We knew exactly who was where and who was a part of this network. Okay, and so after 9/11, they decided to act. That's when the CIA went into Afghanistan and they started killing or taking these people out worldwide. And that's the real reason you were all safe for a long time, because they actually removed the entire network worldwide. And it was a very disciplined. And I told Pompeo this. I said it was a very disciplined, focused, targeted approach, and it worked just fine. It was actually focused by people going after specific known individuals.
But as far as your question, I think it's beyond the scope of what they would know. As far as this is a bigger discussion. There's a really good.
I think I can shed some light on that. Yeah, you're talking about Al-Midar, right? And what was the other fellow's name?
Hazmi.
Yeah. Okay. They were known to be in, and the FBI was in touch with them and so forth. And CIA knew their associations. And the CIA was supposed to share information with the FBI person they had seconded to the CIA. And he did know about this, but he was told not to tell the FBI. And now, why would they do that? Well,
Yeah,
the
why?
best explanation is simply this. The CIA had no sources in Al-Qaeda. It's a little embarrassing, you know, a lot embarrassing. Here they got 2 live ones. FBI doesn't know about them really, you know. We got control as long as the FBI doesn't know about them. They wanted to turn, that's a technical term. They wanted to turn them into assets. They wanted to turn them into spies. Once they told the FBI officially, they lost control because they're in the United States. FBI would take over. It's bureaucratic stuff like this.
Do you get a
that
chance to
drives
read-
me crazy, but
do you
I
get
think
a
that's the answer to that
Did
one.
you get a chance to read Cyberbrief at all? Because Zelikow came out the other day and pretty much said that that's not true, that Mark Rossini had said that we were trying to turn them.
Who said
Right.
it's not
Well,
true?
Mr. Zelikow, Philip.
Who?
Phil
Zelikow.
Zelikow,
Philip Zelikow.
executive
Oh,
director.
Zelikow. Oh,
Yeah.
I don't believe a thing he says.
Well, if you read all the comments, we got involved commenting on that. It was kind of fun.
Yeah. No, I think this is a much bigger conversation. The great book to read, I think it's called Disconnecting the Dots. That's the book, right? Disconnecting the Dots is a must read because it goes through exactly this issue of why FBI and CIA were not communicating, and there is a higher level that you can argue all day whether or not it was, you know, CIA playing games with the FBI or there was a much bigger operation that they were trying to do. But the point is, yeah, Mark Rossini is a great person. I've interviewed him multiple times. There's a much bigger conversation. I just don't think I think it's beyond the scope of this conversation now to get into those details. So let's go to the next question.
Okay, so just a quick question. In your hindsight review, do you believe or do you feel that Osama bin Laden was the mastermind of 9/11 or might have been someone's patsy?
Well, I don't believe he was the mastermind, but he certainly supported it and made sure it was funded.
Do you believe there was a mastermind? Do you have any information?
Well, there was a planner. I think it happened in Hamburg with Atta. They did the planning in Hamburg, and I think the evidence that was available, at least I think, showed that Osama bin Laden supported it. They funded it right through his network. They funded the.
It may have been hatched in Hamburg then.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
It was recently announced that companies are not supposed to use the Kaspersky, the Russian software, anymore. And I've also read online that the CIA is now mimicking some of the Kaspersky's ability to show tracking of things that they've infiltrated it. So other than activism, is there anything that you can recommend that the individual can do in terms of protecting their data, or is there we're just exposed?
Well, if they want you, there's virtually nothing you could do. I mean, you can use U.S. products and they'll pass it on to them.
Right.
So
What do you think about the Kaspersky and this talk they're saying about that?
Well, I think they're trying to push them out of business. Yeah. So if you start character assassination against them without any proof, I might add, because this seems to be the standard technique they're using, just start with character assassination. That's all.
Right.
So let's see some proof here. I haven't seen any there either.
Right, and you didn't hear that the CIA has infiltrated the Kaspersky software and is actually using it.
No, but I would sure that the hundreds of millions of lines of code go into all kinds of operating systems now, not just U.S., I'm sure, because the British are helping us too. We all cooperate in this effort. So and all the Five Eyes are a part of it, as well as about 8 or 9 other countries in the world, Japan, Germany, and so on. Most of them are in Europe. And you could expect the Israelis to be a part of it. So. Somewhere in there, So
it doesn't really matter.
I know. It's just all a pack of lies.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So many things went wrong on 9/11, starting with warnings being ignored, thin thread is stopped, NORAD has problems. Yet to be explained is how 3 World Trade Center buildings are destroyed to the ground in virtually free fall acceleration. The Pentagon, one of the most protected buildings in the world, is compromised in a way that does not fit what we were told. and I will leave it at that. This is just a tip of the iceberg. To me, this goes further than terrorism, incompetency, and cover-ups. So can you tell me, in your opinions, what is the iceberg?
I really am not capable of answering that. I really don't know what to say.
Leave it at that. Let's just get to, yeah, it's beyond the scope of.
Maybe
Okay.
I'll just say this. Look, the 9/11 Commission was a cover-up. Pure and simple. I mean, hello, Governor Kane and Lee Hamilton, the Democrat they tried out for such occasions, they wrote a book 2 years after they did the commission report, and they said what? We were set up to fail. We weren't given enough time, weren't given enough money, weren't given enough access to classified material. Oh, we're set up to fail. Well, that's just great, just great. So what we need, obviously, is an independent investigation. I am just in awe of all the stuff that you guys have done out there in New York. And what really gets me ticked off is when people call people who are really trying to get at the truth, including belittling now, conspiracy theorists, okay? They're not conspiracy theorists, they're just trying to find what the hell actually happened. So I applaud your efforts. I wish I could shed more light, but I can't, but don't stop.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is kind of a different question than what I've kind of been hearing. It kind of pertains to the movie. And in the movie, I heard that you found 5 different markers that
He can't tell you.
you can't tell me that.
No, those are still classified. But I would say this about it. They came right out of their doctrine. It's right out of their military doctrine.
Okay.
Our people just don't recognize it.
Thank you.
And we've got copies of it.
All right. Where can I find those copies? Like on?
Actually, if you Google military doctrine, Russian military doctrine, you should get a lot of references for that.
Thank you.
Cool. It's on the web.
Good evening. An earlier question came up about who benefits from the situation with 9/11 and other things that have taken place that have been covered up in our nation. And in keeping with that idea, there is the Patriot Act, there is wars all over the globe that we have become involved in since that time. And there is the squelching of any type of creativity or any type of reaching out to other people in our nation. Our thinking has become very downplayed. We've been, what's the word for it? Dumbed down, so to speak. And the benefit is that there's another thing going on that we have to pay attention to, and that is the fact that all of these cover-ups keep us so busy thinking about and diverting us from the nation's problems, like, for instance, the fact that we are headed for another financial crash in our system because things that took place while we were trying to figure out what the heck is going on, like the taking down of Glass-Steagall in 1999, the leading into all of the wars that have taken place that take money away from our domestic causes. So in your opinion, we're headed for another crash. We have a $27 trillion deficit in our nation's economy now. People are against each other. There's no jobs. They've taken down our manufacturing. All of this is related. So could you kind of tell us what you feel about the connection between the takedown of Glass-Steagall? We are now headed for another deficit because of that. It is going to be a bigger blowout than in 2008. And our nation is headed for that unless we put Glass-Steagall back into place. What is your idea about the connections between the wars and our economy and how we are so diverted and our attention is so taken away that we don't even know what's going on and it's coming to hit us very, very soon, unless we put Glass-Steagall, and y'all can look this up, unless we put Glass-Steagall back into place and save our economy, no matter who the president is.
Okay, I think, yeah, basically it's like everything is messed up, as we know, when it comes to this country. But we only have less than 10 minutes, so I don't know if you want to make any remarks. Basically, she surmised it pretty well, but is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right that we just have to be aware of these things, and we can kind of grouse about it. We can, there's a principle called the NOAA principle, and that is no more awards for predicting rain, awards only for building arcs. What we need to do is build some arcs. And the arc that would respond to your problem is something that would take a lot of people to do, but you start in small groups. You don't just sit around, and you're not just sitting around, but you call attention to them, and then you do something, not just
like
grouse
past Glass-Steagall, which has been in Congress.
Amen, yeah.
It's been in Congress for like 10
Schumer
years
and
already.
Let's
those rich cats.
Let's get to the next question.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris Sayer. I wanted to say that to Diane Roark that I really appreciate what you said on BAI and again tonight about Tea Party conservatives and progressive Democrats working together, because what I've found actually in just organizing on the street around the whole situation right now, Robert Mueller, Comey, Brennan, Clapper, and the Bush gang, all together. They seem to be all together in trying to maintain this Cold War policy on the planet, but that the population, whatever label they are, the vast majority of people want peace and economic development. And so there was just a successful tour with the president, meeting with Xi Jinping, meeting with Putin and others, and this potential for economic cooperation. You lived through the Cold War. You were in the intelligence community in that whole period. I just wanted to see what your thoughts are on the potential for peace between the U.S., Russia, and China, and that this could be a whole different situation that we're looking at in the future.
Me? Well, I certainly think that those are all positive things we should be doing. I mean, and certainly the justification for another Cold War is absurd. There's nothing there. I mean, in fact, it's counterproductive. And there are things in common that we have interest in common with the Russians. Yeah. Why don't we start with that and work from there? I mean, certainly it looks like the president's trip to China, they found common ground there too and are starting to do some things. Why don't we support that? That would be productive for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hate to refer to our president as a broken clock, but even a broken clock is right 2 times. Is it 2 times a day, Bill? Yeah, 2 times a day. All right.
Before digital.
He's support Israel. Come on.
Before digital clocks. Which
okay. Number 1, why not a decent relationship with Russia? I mean, you can have James Clapper, head of the intelligence community, saying, as he did, Russians are almost genetically inclined to deceive and to murder and to... The head of national intelligence, the Russians are genetically... Give me a break, okay? So reaching out to Russia has no downside, okay? And number 2, NATO. It's a vestigial organ. You ought to send those bureaucrats out to work in the field somewhere where we can do something productive. There's no need for NATO anymore either. Those are the 2 things that he was right about, and we ought to support that, and we can disparage the rest.
All right, last question, so make it a good one.
Well, I'm going to try to. I want to bundle my question with some commentary like everyone else, but I want to be relevant. I would say with the release of the recent files on the JFK assassination, your dad certainly has enough to create a sequel and then some. The mind-boggling aspect of how the deep state has kept us in the dark for so long goes way back in time, and certainly during the Nazi era and the OSS becoming the CIA, and then through Project Paperclip, bringing many brilliant minds from Germany here to infiltrate our culture and transform it, that a lot of this has to do with why we have a deep state and why it's as developed as it is at this point. So going on through time and seeing the criminals now, by being able to connect these dots better that theorists had at a time when the powers that be decided to call anyone who had a view of the Warren Commission that was contrary, conspiracy theorists. That's where it originated, I'm told, by the CIA. Okay, so we're typecast as theorists, but then when these documents come out, it's not about theory anymore, that you are able to see a lot more than you even imagined.
What's the question?
The question is this, going up into 9/11 and beyond it, because I was a witness to the buildings falling. I'm a New Yorker. And I have a lot of questions that I could go into about why was there thermite and this and that discovered in the building steel. And a friend of mine was the detective in that whole investigation. The question is very much to the point of today, and now that we have this spy net set up, and we are getting bombarded every day with chemtrails that have Morgellons in them, and people don't understand why they're doing this to depopulate us. Not one person here tonight has said why they are doing this, because they want a one world government. And people need to get awake to that. Today is a day of history. A satellite was sent up today that will boost the NSA's ability dramatically to transfer information and technology through a laser beam to satellites. They are going to spread out this laser beam technology throughout the entire world. So life changes after today for us and for the NSA. And my question to Mr. Binney is very simple, because I have tremendous respect for him. What do you think, Mr. Binney, knowing that you have been disconnected from what they're doing for so long, knowing that you cannot tell us everything, what do you think is the purpose or the mechanism by which all of this is going to be used for people who are suffering from Morgellons and have their bodies being taken over by this transhumanism and this particulate?
Okay.
And how it's going to communicate with the threat fusion centers and the smart dust.
We have way too much to cover in that.
About smart dust, Mr. Benny. Can you tell us about smart dust, what you know?
Well, I personally don't know anything because I've not been involved in it. But the spot beam technology you're talking about is to limit access to the communications they're using, so they can control who can see it. That can be satellite to satellite, satellite to ground, ground to satellite, and so on. You know, so it's a spot beam technology.
Do you know anything about Morgellons and
That's
why
no.
they created Morgellons?
We have to end there.
No, I don't. I'm sorry.
It's beyond the scope of this conversation.
Yeah.
So thank you all for coming. I'm sorry. Well, if you want, maybe ask at the back.
Folks, before we end, just a little housekeeping. It's very important everybody takes any trash, refuse, coffee cups, anything out with you, because we'll get charged if you leave trash behind, okay, please. And in this insert, there's a phone number, a hotline here, 347 number that you can call to be in touch with us for further actions, further events, because don't we have to extend the value that we got here and translate this into progressive action? Would you agree? Fantastic. Folks, well, just help us thank these incredible speakers for coming. Thank you to Dennis Speed, Lynn Speed, the whole staff, to all the AV people up there. Thank you all so much for everything you've done. Hope I didn't miss anybody. Thank you to WBAI and to everybody who helped to publicize this event. Thank you. And going to see you all at the next event, I hope. Okay. Thank you as well for being here. And again, I commend you for this incredible presence at this incredible event. Thank you.